righty.
Okay, the last question. Oh, food safety, GAPS. Folks, I gotta warn you, I come down hard on the opinion that GAPS is a burden that is not warranted for the small growers. If you do statistical studies, small growers are not making people sick. But that said, we pay very close attention to making sure that we do what it takes to guarantee that that continues to be the case. Because if there ever were an illness created by small growers, it would set us back hugely and make it easier for them to put even more onerous regulations on us. So we pay real close attention to that. Our compost is all heated in what would be considered a a container. We have forced air bins. So it's heated in the forced air bins. We keep very close records. We exceed, people know what PFRP means? Process to further reduce pathogens. That's the government standard of how to treat your compost. We exceed those standards by many times. In the kind of container we do it in, you basically have to hit 132 plus, right, for 3 days. We stay over 150. Juan, are you nearby? How long do we stay over 150 on average for a batch of compost? Over a week and a half. And then we slowly drop down. We're over 132 for over a month usually, right? And we turn it all the time, so we're getting complete take care on that. The truth is, I forget sometimes if they've sprayed compost tea, walk through there, eat a tomato and don't rinse it. You know?
Sell the compost tea?
Pardon? We do not sell it. We did brew it actually. Marshall brewed it for a fellow farmer last week. You know, we would support local people in brewing it. We probably wouldn't sell it. We might ask for cost. You know, we might ask them to cover the time that Marshall would spend on it. But we would definitely help people with their compost tea. You can't really sell it without doing things that I don't even respect in any way except for fresh. It has to be fresh. Marshall, do you have that jar of tea?
He's having a sub, I think.
If you'll pass it around and just take a whiff, you can tell when compost tea is ready. 2 ways that I know of: by spending an awful lot of money on a test, or by giving it a sniff. If you've made your compost tea right, it smells like the healthy side of a stream, right? That's the smell. And I tell people that and they go, I don't know if I'll know that. As soon as they smell it, they go, that's it. You know? And so we know we have our tea right. We know we have the right amount of oxygen, the right amount of foods, that the life that thrives in there basically eats pathogens, right? The kind of pathogens that Richard was talking to us about, those pathogens are basically facultative anaerobes, right? They survive in mammals' guts, right? They can survive outside of mammal's gut, but they don't do well, right? The way we get in trouble, why we've had these food outbreaks, is because of large-scale production where huge amounts of food are put together. It only takes one farmer to mess up, right? And then the stuff is still moist and it's packaged and it sits forever, you know? Nothing we do fits that model. Nothing small growers do fits that model, you know? And then even small growers that don't do tea have created such life on their leaves and in their farms that those anaerobes are lunch. Those anaerobes are food for the beneficials. You know, that's why I'm pretty impatient about GAPS and worked really hard to make sure the impact of the food safety bill was not as bad as it could have been. I'm still not happy with it, but we did get some changes which are real important, the Tester Amendment and stuff like that. Richard, did I answer the question well enough?
Excellent job.
Okay, good. Thank you for the question, because I like to talk about that subject. Okay, and a gentleman asked me about the squash bug eggs in there. Squash bugs, you probably all know, bugs are tough, right? Yeah. Bugs are tough, you know. One of our worst problems is harlequin bugs. And we've solved that, or resolved it a lot this year, I think, don't you, Jeremy? By massively rotating. We're fortunate that we've got another section of the farm that's on the other side of those trees. And so we just moved all of our brassicas, or almost all of them, over to there. We're kind of monitoring the ones we have here, you know. I'm kind of okay with leaving a few in because it keeps our levels of other predators up. If you look at our kale leaves, you'll find yellow eggs, and those yellow eggs used to be a cabbage worm, but now they're beconid wasp, you know. So our theory is that we never don't want to have pests. We want to have a balance of pests and predators. We want to have so much life that we have that balance. But the bugs are tough. There are wasps that parasitize bug eggs, and we probably have them because we don't do things to get rid of them. But still, in the summertime, if we've got brassicas, we get hammered by harlequin bugs. And we didn't do a good job of handling them last year. This year with our rotation, we're in much better shape. But on squash, one of the things we spray the most is squash, because we do a regular spraying because we have vine borers. And if we don't spray for vine borers, our squash go down.
And are you doing BT or what are you doing?
We do BT and soap twice a week at the base of the squash plant. Guess where the squash bugs hang out? Base of the squash plant. Guess what? Soap and BT don't really touch the adults. But those darling little ghosty babies, they're highly vulnerable to the soap. So we're spraying for vine borers, but serendipitously, we get good enough control of squash bugs. We don't get rid of them, but it's all about threshold, right? If it's not hurting us economically, we don't put any more time into them than we have to, you know? So yes, we have squash bugs, you can find them, but because we spray for vine borer, we get the added effect of controlling the nymphs, you know? And most of the nymphs don't make it. We get the eggs and we get the few adults that are not down there at the base or that aren't bothered by the soap. So that's the answer to the squash bugs. The other thing that's exciting about that, I mean, we could do this whole talk, and I love to do it, but come back in July about the different ways we deal with the bugs. But the other thing that's exciting to do in there, I actually was worrying a week ago that we weren't going to get enough squash beetles and bean beetles. I was afraid we wouldn't get enough and we wouldn't get them early enough. That's because we've learned to use Pediobius fovulatus, the bean beetle predator. Probably down in Alabama, that's naturalized by now, I assume. You probably don't have bean beetles, right?
I haven't seen them.
Yeah, that's because they've released this wasp and it controls them.
I haven't seen a bean beetle in years.
That's because you have Pediobius fovulatus, and the problem up here is Pediobius fovulatus, its juvenile cycle is in the larva of the bean beetle and squash beetle, and we never have that cycle through the winter. So we have to introduce it every summer. But we introduce it, we get complete control, and if you live in the mountains in the Carolinas, Richard, you can testify, they're a huge problem.
Yeah.
They're a huge problem, but if you have PDO, and what I love is, I'm hoping that this year we can have it established early enough that we can then share them with people.
And it's
Because
a wasp?
it's a wasp. It's a tiny little wasp from India.
Oh,
You know,
I've got wasp I can send to you.
you got wasp. Well, you know, wasps, of course, are beneficial insects. They're not beneficial if they sting us, but everybody should know this. You should all know this if you're on the farm, right?
Yeah.
You all know this weed.
Planting.
You know what to do with it if you get stung, right?
Chew it up and slap it on.
Chew it up and slap it on. Keep chewing, keep slapping it on. The sting goes away completely. White-faced hornet, right on my ankle, really sensitive spot. 20 minutes later, small red spot, no pain, no swelling. So don't think of pollinators as bad guys. They're always good guys, even if they do sting us. Okay. I think that covers what we're going to talk about here. Except for we're going to have Jeremy talk a little bit about lasagna beds here, so he doesn't have to carry the garlic around. But there's a question first, yeah.
Did you say every 2 weeks with that
No,
BT
twice
spray?
a week.
Twice
a week, BT and soap, base of the plant. You know? The first time I did that, I had to wholesale squash because I've been planning rotations and none of my rotations died. You know? Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I'm hoping that this year, now that we know about regalia for downy mildew, that's going to be a similar solution, because downy mildew has really hit us hard the last few years. And I learned from Kelly Gilkerson at, that's her name, right? Did I have it right? Kelly at the research. Iverson, rather, right. Right. That regalia, as a pre-spray, getting the plant's resistance up high because it raises phenol levels in the leaves, and then in combination with the rotation of organic fungicides, we seem to be getting pretty darn good control. You know, and so if we can, that last year we were playing catch up and it didn't work, but this year I'm hoping that we'll be having the same kind of effect that we had with the BT and the soap when we first started doing that. And that's the kind of stuff we want to do here, is come up with those solutions to those tough problems.